Hi, so a while ago I was made aware of how ridiculously cheap solar panels have become and decided I'd get a few to put on the workshop roof just to experiment with. There's 6 panels here and another one in the garden. These are 400 watt panels and these were £60 each delivered. The silly thing is that sort of tub style flat roof mounts are almost as expensive as the panels, so I just made up some my own mounts using some aluminium channel and some standard solar support rail. These go through the roof into the roof joist with some bolts, which are like sort of screw thread on one end and machine screw on the other, which work quite nicely because the inside of the roof is all accessible. And as I already had this Bluetti power bank, I decided, well, let's use that to start with. With 7 panels, this thing's got 2 MPPT inputs in the main unit, which will take 3 panels each, and there's also another input on the battery pack that will take a single panel, so that I can actually sort of pretty much max this out in terms of charging. And the first plan was to use this to charge the car. Now the issue there is obviously what you want it to do is sort of charge the battery up, and then when the battery is just about full, then turn the AC output on to charge it through this granny charger. This is a 32 amp per Zencar unit, which I've turned down to 8 amps, and obviously the one thing that the internal software this won't do is do that. It will turn on when it reaches a certain charge level and turn off when it goes below that. Now I found a bit of information online that some of the Bluetooth protocol on this have been reverse engineered. I sort of pulled it apart and I found that the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi is done through this board, which sits near the top. It actually talks to the main unit through an RS485 interface. I thought, well, that's going to be much easier than dicking around with Bluetooth. So I sort of hooked into that, and the combination of a bit of reverse engineering and using some of the commands that I found online managed to get it to do what I want. I just hacked up some simple software on the PC to literally turn it on and off based on the state of charge. Unfortunately, the state of charge information has some problems. If you look at the chart, you get sudden sort of jumps of 20% for no obvious reason, and you can use the battery voltage as a guide. The problem is that when it thinks it's at 100%, it stops charging, and when it thinks it's below something like 20%, it turns the AC output off regardless of what the actual state of charge is. So it's not ideal, but it did work. I don't do a huge amount of mileage, and it's kept the car sort of happily charged, but there's also now we're sort of getting a bit sunnier weather, it's sort of wasting a lot of power, it's just not being used. So I decided to get a like a proper solar inverter. This is a Solax 2.5 kilowatt unit, which I've rigged up. You can configure this to not export anything to the grid, so you don't have to do any paperwork or sort of show any installation certificates or anything. It just sort of basically reduces your electricity bill, and this works in conjunction with a current transformer that you put across your incoming main supply, and it will just regulate its output so that it never exports anything, which I think works. Yeah, it works fine. Now, one annoying thing about this is that the display, it's just got a simple 2-line LCD, but it's pretty much unreadable when the backlight's not on, and there isn't any way to tell it to not turn the backlight off as far as I know. So I think I'm going to open this up and just see if we can do a little mod to leave the backlight on all the time. It comes with this wireless and wired LAN interface. There's actually an RJ45 in the bottom. Slightly annoyingly, looking at the documentation before I bought it, it implied this was an optional extra, so I ordered one of these, but then found that it actually comes with one in the box, so I ended up with a spare one. It's only about 20 quid, so it's not a huge deal. So I thought, well, we've got to take it apart. Let's do a quick mini teardown and see what's inside it. So there's a very heavy, chunky unit. There's the whole back is just one casting with all the heatsink fins built in. I think these circular things are probably filters on the back, just because there'll be a certain amount of resistive heating. One kind of nice thing, it's got a vent here. Now these are commonly used in any sort of outdoor type sealed enclosure, and it's designed to pass air but not liquids, because if you've got a large volume, the pressure inside will increase and decrease with temperature, and what can happen is that you can actually get water going through seals, or also actually going through the centre of a cable. And because of that, if you've got a sort of a moderate sized outdoor enclosure, then it's good to put one of these vents on there just to avoid that problem. You can actually get cabled LANs with the vents built in as well, but these are the most common sort, and they're not particularly expensive, so it's always a wise precaution if anything that's going to be outdoors. Now this is designed to be sort of semi-waterproof, because in the UK gear like this tends to be mounted indoors, but in other countries, like for example Australia, they tend to have a lot of their electrical fuse boards and so on in a sort of semi-outdoor location, so this has been designed to be reasonably liquid proof. There's a plate here with the RJ45 for various interfaces back here. There's a seal around that plate, but because it's got the RJ45 and a cabled LAN. One really stupid thing on the wireless and LAN interface, they've got their cloud nonsense thing, but you can connect to this locally and just get local information and settings without having to connect to their cloud or have an account with them, which is good. Really stupid thing is though, it's got this QR code that you have to scan to get the app to connect, but they put it on the side, so when this is plugged in and you've got your solar cables plugged in, they actually get in the way of this label. Yeah, they should have put it on the front, not on the side. It's just one of those stupid little things which slightly thoughtless bit of design there. And they use this slightly weird socket for the AC connection, again because this is designed to be reasonably waterproof. Yeah, they need to use something designed for that, and there isn't really a standard for waterproof AC connectors other than like the very large like 16 amp blue things which are a bit too big for something like this. Yeah, if it was an indoor thing they could use like an IEC 10 or 16 amp inlet, but say because it's designed to be reasonably well sealed they use this thing. And this has got a built-in DC isolator chunky switch there, just to avoid having to have an external switch, which are actually quite often the cause of problems with solar systems, sort of dodgy external isolators. It's just 4 big Allen screws holding this together, no warranty seals or anything unpleasant like that. This range comes in quite a wide variety of powers, and there's actually 11 different variants of this thing, all in the same physical size, from 600 watts up to 4 kilowatts. Now, I can't see how there's any point in having so many different variants. Yeah, like 600 watt, 700 watt, 800 watt. It just seems ridiculous. And I'm sure a lot of them have got exactly the same hardware in it. The firmware change to set the output level. It may well be that some of them, perhaps some of the lower power ones, they maybe omit some of the power semiconductors. I'd be highly surprised if a lot of these weren't identical hardware. Yeah, what is the point of having so many different versions? It's ridiculous. Right, this cover comes off quite nicely. This is front cover's also cast metal, so it's really solid, very chunky feeling. So inside we've got all the sort of power electronics you'd expect to find. The board appears to be conformal coated. I'll take off some of these smaller boards to take a look underneath. We've got this sort of user interface board here. You've got these sort of spring contacts. These press against the front panel to provide some touch buttons, and they're sort of sprung just so that this is sort of compressed against the front panel. If you've got a touch sensor against a plastic thing, you want to try and avoid having any air gap between the electrode and the button, because that decreases the capacitive coupling quite significantly. So this is your interface. There's a Giga device ARM processor on here. This will be probably providing the USB interface to the external network thing. Not a great deal else, sort of bog standard 16:2 LCD. This board here looks like it's a small mains power supply. Now of course this thing is primarily powered by solar, and there's not a great deal of point of actually having it running when there isn't solar input, except maybe you want to just be able to configure it. It can run on just with just a mains supply, no solar input. So it looks like this is what this board is for. It's got a mains transformer, which you really don't see many of these days. Even really small stuff tends to use little switch mode power supplies. What's a little bit odd though is that it's got this extra little subboard on there, which that could easily have been integrated onto the main PCB. Unless maybe there's different variants of these. I have to try and figure out what that does. But so you've got the transformer, rectifier, smoothing. So it's just a bog standard unregulated supply. It says 12 volts out here. That goes off to the front panel, live and neutral mains in, little fuse. Oh, that's interesting. This other connector goes to a current transformer around the solar panel input. So this little board here is doing something with the current. Now this is not a earth leakage detection because the current is only around one of the inputs, and there's a 8-way connector that plugs down to the bottom board. That connector's marked arc, so I wonder if this is actually some arcing detection. So if it would be looking for maybe some high frequency content on the current from the panels, which would indicate there's some arcing problem. So maybe that's just a safety thing. And again, that may well be region specific. Certain standards probably require different types of protection. And if you look on here, there's quite a number of different safety standards on here. So I suspect, this is for detecting DC arcs on the panel. Obviously they're a bit short of space on there, but it may also be that this is an option, so they have different boards depending on the region. Of course, another possibility is this whole module could be just being bought in. I don't recognise the manufacturer logo on this, but the part number on this is LS502CC, and the other device here also is LS, I think 302. It's very hard to read because of the conformal coating. So it may well be that this is a specialist chipset, perhaps a micro and a specialist A to D for that arc fault detection function. So it could actually be that this is just a standard module they buy in to provide that function. In front here, you've got HCT, which is the current transformer, TXRX, presumably data, MLED, and there's arc on there as well, so that's maybe an arc output. Okay, now you can see most of the main board. We've got the solar panels coming in here, say through this current transformer for the arc detection, through the isolator, and down here, great big common mode filter, and there's these wires sort of disappearing bit behind, which I'm sure is for those big circular objects we saw from the back, which I'm sure are probably some more filtering. Big chunky capacitors, 470 off 550 volts, and here we can see what looks like 4 semiconductor devices. So these are probably going to be IGBTs or high voltage MOSFETs or something. You see some isolation slots around there, which might be for isolation, might also be for mechanical isolation, because if these are bolted down to the heatsink, you don't need stress between the device and these pins. So there might be some of those cutouts might be at least as much for mechanical relief as electrical isolation. I'm guessing there's probably gate drivers here, and there's probably isolation from the gate drivers. The mains and the panels are not isolated from each other, but obviously there's low voltage stuff like the LAN interface, and there's RS485 on this connector here, so there will be some sort of low voltage isolated stuff, but most of this is going to be non-isolated, connected straight to the mains. So I'd imagine we've got a DC bus here, then an H bridge going into a big sort of inductor to filter that out. And the basic architecture of this is it's an AC current source, so it forces current against the grid, provide the power while sort of staying synchronized. 4 relays here. I wonder if maybe they're just using duplication here for safety, because obviously this thing's connected directly to your grid supply. It's also connected directly to the panel, so if something bad went wrong here, it could be quite bad in terms of like smoke, fire, etc. So I wonder if they're actually using sort of 2 series relays, one on each of the mains connections for just redundancy. When it turns on, you do hear quite a lot of clicking, so I wonder if it might even be actually doing some contact testing to check that the contacts are opening and closing. And again, some more filtering down here, and the mains connection is down here, so you can see our sort of power path here, like solar around here through this bridge, probably through the filtering, going out here and probably coming back here, then through these relays. Obviously this is working at fairly high frequency. I'm not really sure what frequency this runs at, but obviously a lot of this is just sort of filtering. Logo on the board saying BST, so thinking about it, it makes sense that this is basically a boost converter. We take the DC from the panels, we boost it up to a high DC bus voltage, or 500-ish volts, which is going to be higher than whatever, because this thing will work down to a 50 volt input up to I think about 450 volts. So obviously that needs to be boosted up to a fixed value, and then that's then chopped by this bridge to reproduce the sine wave, feed into the grid. So in fact one of those inductors here is probably the just the boost inductor. Interesting little detail I noticed on the solar input connectors. There's some second wires, and there's this little subboard whose sole function is just to provide 2 10 nanofarad capacitors to ground, again for noise filtering. I mean, sort of getting the ENC on something like this right must be a very hell of a challenge. Doing a massive amount of power, switching high frequencies. So it looks like they needed these extra capacitors, because obviously you've got panels on the roof which would act like an antenna for any RF noise kicking out. I'd imagine that there may well be some specific standards covering that aspect of it. And this is the connector up to the user interface board, which is the world's longest pin header. Okay, this actually comes apart relatively easily. The semiconductors are mounted on these sort of plastic blocks and just screw into the back through some long screws. So in the back we've got the large inductors. There's a 750 microhenry boost inductor here, and then 1.1 millihenry 2 series inductors for basically a low pass filter, which that in conjunction with this 3.3 microfarad capacitor filters the high frequency chopped waveform down into a sort of 50 hertz sine wave. Then it goes through these relays. Looking on the PCB tracking, it looks like these are just simply series connected, presumably for safety. There doesn't seem to be any monitoring of the intermediate point to detect any welded contacts. And down here we can see this is a current transformer for detecting residual current, sort of imbalance, earth leakage, etc. More mains filtering, gas discharge, surge arrestor. There's a text instruments DSP that's in charge of all the actual inverter waveform type stuff. On the back these are IGBTs, so we have going from the solar input, we've got the boost switching transistor, rectifier diode, then into the capacitors. Then we've got an H bridge of IGBTs. Now what I'm not sure about is what these are doing. The output of the H bridge goes out to the inductor, but also seems to go to these two, which have the center pins connected together and the source is connected to either side of the bridge. So yeah, that's like almost like a solid state relay type configuration. So I wonder if that's just some sort of voltage clamp or some sort of safety thing. But I've looked through a few sort of grid time versus schematics and reference design, and yeah, I'm not seeing this anywhere, so I'm really a bit puzzled as to what these are doing. So if anyone knows about this sort of stuff, please put it in the comments. I'd be quite curious as to why there's this extra pair of transistors across the output of the H bridge. So there's the filter capacitor here, and then through the relays out to the grid here. There's a small isolated section down here. This is the external interface. This is RS485 and the current transformer interface for the export limiting. The digital isolator here. And again, you can see a sort of isolation barrier here with OPSO there and some isolation gaps just around this area of the PCB. And this is also where the user interface board goes, so the user interface is probably isolated. So that's providing the USB interface for the wireless and LAN interface, so that's probably wants to be on an isolated. Build quality seems perfectly fine, reasonably impressed. There's a fan connector here which is unused in this version. Maybe they use that in some of the high power versions or for different packaging options. This is probably a low voltage supply that comes from the DC bus, just to provide all the DC for the rest of the circuitry, and these are probably isolated supplies for the gate drivers that drive the IGBTs. There's what looks like a current transformer here which will be monitoring the output of the H bridge. This is the LAN and Wi-Fi interface plugged in via USB. To nobody's surprise, there's an ESP32 module in here, and the LAN interface is done by a Wisnet W5500, which is a very nice little chip if you want to do 100 meg Ethernet. It's just got a very simple SPI interface and handles a lot of the protocols on chip, so it's a really nice, really simple to implement way of adding wired network to a product. A couple of little single pair LAN transformers there, quite a bit smaller and lower profile than using a conventional LAN transformer. Okay, right, now getting down to the actual reason I took this apart before I got distracted by the teardown. I want to get the backlight on permanently. The reason is that where this is mounted, it's somewhere I walk past all the time, so it'd be nice just to glance across and see what the current solar output is. Without having to turn the backlight on manually. And this is a bog standard LCD pinout, so these are very standard. And so these are the two backlight power pins. We've got a transistor, either transistor or MOSFET just down here. Just doing a continuity check on this. The centre pin, which is the drain or a collector, depending on what that device is, that goes to the backlight negative pin. Backlight positive goes through this 47 ohm resistor to presumably a power supply somewhere. So this is clearly the transistor that's turning the backlight on and off. So just to override this, all you need to do is basically take that backlight negative and just connect it to ground, which you could either do on this side of the PCB or on this side. So I've just linked those pins together. You wouldn't even need to take this board out to do this, so it's a very simple and easy mod. And there we are now with a permanent backlight. If I wanted to make this a bit dimmer, I could have used a resistor instead of a wire, but I think this will be fine as it is. It's nice and readable now.